well, I got to be on Slack because that's where the team is. Your most important work as a developer is to do the development work. Controversial opinion. As a developer, having notifications on while you work for anything, Slack, social media, email, etc., is unprofessional. So I was thinking about this yesterday, and I've talked about this before. I've talked about, how I think it's important to turn off notifications while you're working. And I'm saying specifically as a developer, more broadly, this applies to deep work. If you are in a role which requires focused, concentrated work, I think this applies. Now, if you're a manager where your primary function is coordinating between people and things like that, this does not apply. When you get interrupted, as a developer, it takes you an insanely long time to get back into the zone. As a developer, you sort of have to, when you're working on a problem, you're sort of building a mental model of all the different things you're interacting with within a code base and within a business problem domain, and it's this sort of fragile balance in your head. And if you get interrupted and tapped on the shoulder and asked a question, then it's going to take you a long time to get back into that focused state. I think it's very common to have notifications on, and it's like, well, I got to be on Slack because that's where the team is. Your most important work as a developer is to do the development work. Now, do you have to help other teammates? Yes, but to the extent that your primary function is helping other teammates, that's putting you more in the manager category than the developer category, I think. Got some comments rolling in already. Max Bucknell. Software development is an interesting profession. We've disrupted so many things and then realized that certain things we viewed as old corporate quagmires were rooted in good practice. But fundamentally, developers should aim to be the platonic ideal of employment. Okay, that's an interesting take, which is to say, judged on outputs, as any job should be, but any job isn't. Whether having notifications enabled can be empirically shown to negatively affect work of everyone is up for debate, I think. So I love what Max is saying about being judged on outputs, and I completely agree. And this is almost the root of why I think it's important to disable notifications, because as developers, we should not be judged on they respond quickly to Slack messages. And I completely agree. We should be judged on how much work are you actually getting done. Now, the second part, I have to say, I completely disagree with. Whether having notifications enabled can be empirically shown to negatively affect work of everyone is up for debate. I do not think it's up for debate that having notifications enabled negatively affects your work. I think the science is clear on that. Comment from Devron. Depends on the environment, in my opinion. If you've got a lot of developers working remotely together, then you need to be able to help each other. The longer I do software development, the more I agree with Uncle Bob's view on the zone. Uncle Bob Martin is sort of widely revered within the development community. Like, it's almost like if I'm going to disagree with him right now, that's like somebody you don't want to disagree with as a general rule, but we'll see. I consider the zone, quote, the zone, to be an extreme narrowing of focus. I agree there, and therefore harmful over extended periods. Completely disagree with that. I don't think it's harmful at all. Usually I want a kind of wide angle focus, intense but not exclusionary. This is something an IFR pilot understands. I can't help but feel that he's on like another level that I'm not understanding, like he's on like an higher Yoda level of understanding here, which is probably the case. But I'm just going to say that I disagree. If you can have an intense focus that's not exclusionary, then that's great. Intense focus is the goal. I'm not sure I've ever personally experienced this, what he's described as a wide angle focus. So it's possible I just don't get it, but I'm gonna just foolishly go on record saying I disagree with that. Going back to Devron's comment, if you've got a lot of developers working remotely together, then you need to be available to help each other. So I completely agree, but I think the nature of the help should be asynchronous within let's call it a 2 to 3 hour window. So the way that in my vision of the world, each of those 10 developers should be going into the zone, no notifications for 3-hour periods. When they come out of the zone is when they should come up for air, respond to things, respond to questions, help each other. Now, for starters, I think that if you're working remotely as a developer, you got to be senior. So let's assume, first off, that you're talking about 10 developers that are senior developers working together remotely. Yes, you definitely should help each other. That adds a huge amount of value to the team as a whole. But I think the nature of the help should be fundamentally asynchronous as opposed to synchronous. So those are my thoughts on the topic.